The spotlight still burned, harsher now that no one else was there to share its heat. It carved deep shadows under his eyes, turned the sweat on his forehead into liquid silver. He had walked only 3 steps toward the black curtain when his legs betrayed him, simple as that. One knee folded, then the other. He caught himself on all fours, palms slapping the stage so hard the impact traveled up his arms like electric current. He stayed there, breathing through his mouth, staring at the glittering murder scene between his hands. Shards of glass and cheap metal frame caught the light in cruel little prisms. One jagged piece still wore half the certification logo, LLON. 30 had been sliced neatly in 2. A sound came out of him then, not a sob, not a laugh, something wetter and more animal. It rattled in his chest and wouldn't leave. 15 years ago he had stood on this same make of stage. Smaller venue, sure, but the same smell of spilled beer and hot lights, and wept for an entirely different reason. The first single had just cracked the top 40. Radio stations were playing it without bribes. Girls in the front row knew every word already, mouths moving in perfect sync like they'd rehearsed it in their sleep. Back then the tears had been gratitude so big it hurt. He remembered thinking, clear as yesterday. If this is the peak, I can die happy right now and it would still be too much gift. Now the same throat that had screamed choruses to stadiums felt lined with broken glass. He crawled, actually crawled, the few feet back to the wreckage. Knees dragged through the debris, he felt tiny stings but didn't care. One large fragment still had most of his face on it, that frozen, airbrushed grin from the photo shoot 6 years ago when the label insisted he look approachable yet dangerous. The irony had been funny once. Now it was just exhausting. He picked up the biggest piece. Turned it over. The reverse side showed the RIAA sticker, peeling at one edge. Someone, probably an intern, had written in Sharpie, Jackson Holt, 30 times platinum, November 14, 25. Yesterday's date. Fresh wound. Jackson Holt, he said aloud, tasting the name like something spoiled. It had never really fit. His birth certificate said Jackson Andrew Holter, but the manager in 2010 had decided Jackson scanned better on posters and Holt looked punchier without the extra vowel. So they amputated 2 letters and most of his identity in one afternoon. He hadn't fought it. Why would he? They were promising him the moon and handing him the ladder. He let the shard fall. It clinked against its brothers. Slowly, painfully, he sat back on his heels. The stage floor was cold through his jeans. He looked up into the grid of lights, some still on, most asleep, and remembered the first time he'd seen them all ignited at once. Sound check. Empty house. He'd stood exactly here and thrown his arms wide, yelling, "Hit me with everything." The lighting guy had obliged. For 30 seconds Jackson had been blinded by white fire, laughing like a lunatic, feeling like a god who'd finally remembered his own name. Now he couldn't even look straight into one park and without wincing. His phone buzzed in his back pocket. He ignored it. It buzzed again, insistent. Muscle memory made him fish it out anyway. Screen said, "Marty, manager, 11 missed calls. 3 new voicemails. Latest text timestamped 3 minutes ago. Where are you? Crew's breaking down. Security says you never left the building. We need to talk about tomorrow's breakfast show spot. They're still willing to do the sit-down if you apologize for the mic drop last month. Call me. Now." Jackson stared at the words until they blurred. Apologize. For dropping a microphone. After they'd asked him, live on air, to do the same stupid dance he'd been doing since 2012, the one that started as a sarcastic bit at a house party and somehow became his signature move. The host had laughed so hard he'd nearly fallen off his chair. The audience had roared. Jackson had smiled through it, dropped the mic, walked off. Viral clip within the hour. Another 2 million views by breakfast. Another nail. He thumbed the screen dark. The arena's HVAC kicked on with a low whoosh, stirring air that smelled faintly of fog juice and desperation. Somewhere far above, a chain rattled as a roadie moved a spotlight truss. Ordinary sounds. Life continuing without him. He lay down on his back, right there in the wreckage. Glass crunched under his shoulder blades, he welcomed the small pain. Arms spread wide. Stared up into the dark. When he closed his eyes he saw, not memories, exactly, but fragments. A montage played without his permission. Him at 19, bedroom mirror, practicing the hook over and over until his voice cracked and his mother banged on the door yelling that dinner was cold. The first label meeting, suits who smelled like expensive cologne and mild contempt, telling him, the market wants personality over polish. Translation, they wanted a clown who could carry a tune. The night, Catch Me, If You're Fast Enough, went number 1. Hotel suite. Champagne. Strangers in his room. Someone filming him jumping on the bed in his boxers. That clip still lived online, looped endlessly under reaction videos titled, When You Peak at 23. The first time he heard his song in a supermarket. Frozen in the cereal aisle while a middle-aged woman sang the chorus off-key to her toddler. He ducked behind the Frosted Flakes display and cried, quiet, shameful tears, because it was real and because it felt like theft. The awards shows where he lost every category but still had to smile through the montages of his own face. The hospital visit after the second overdose scare. Not pills, never pills, just too much bourbon and too little sleep. The doctor had said, very gently, your blood alcohol was 0.21. Your liver enzymes are screaming. Jackson had laughed and asked for a selfie. Posted it later with the caption, still alive, haters mad. 8 million likes. The slow bleed of relevance. How the screams got quieter each tour. How the arenas shrank from football stadiums to hockey barns to theaters. How the memes multiplied faster than the album sales. And always, always, the same question behind every interview, every tweet, every late-night DM from a concerned fan. When are you going to do something serious? Serious. As if the heartbreak ballads he'd poured blood into on albums 2 and 4 hadn't counted. As if the lyrics about his father's suicide, about watching his mother drink herself numb, about waking up at 27 wondering if he'd already died and this was purgatory, none of it had mattered because the packaging was too bright. Because the hook was too catchy. Because the dance was too easy to mock. He opened his eyes again. A single tear tracked sideways into his hair. I tried, he whispered to the rafters. I really fucking tried. The words hung there a moment, then vanished into the vast, indifferent dark. He rolled onto his side, curled fetal around the biggest shard of platinum. The edge bit into his palm, warm blood welled immediately. He watched it drip onto the stage, small dark coins spreading slowly. His breathing slowed. Not dying. Not yet. Just, stopping. Letting the moment stretch until it hurt less. Somewhere distant, a door opened. Footsteps. 2 sets. Security radios crackling low. Found him. Center stage. Jesus. He's bleeding. Jackson didn't move. The footsteps came closer, cautious now. Flashlight beams swept across him, painting white stripes over his closed eyelids. Jackson? Hey. Can you hear me? He kept his eyes shut. Kept breathing shallow. Let them decide whether he was unconscious or simply done. A hand touched his shoulder, tentative, almost reverent. Call Marty. And get the medic. Now. Another voice, younger, should we move him? Not yet. Just stay with him. The hand stayed. Warm. Steady. Human. For the first time in maybe a decade, Jackson Holt felt seen. Not as the hitmaker. Not as the punchline. Not as the brand. Just as a man lying broken on a cold stage, bleeding on his own platinum grave. He opened his eyes, just a slit. The security guard was maybe 24. Eyes wide with something that looked dangerously close to pity. Jackson tried to speak. Nothing came out at first. Then, hoarse. "Don't tell them I cried." The kid blinked. Swallowed. Nodded once, solemn. "I won't." Jackson closed his eyes again. The spotlight finally dimmed overhead, one bank, then another, until only a single ghost light remained, weak and blue. In that small circle of mercy he lay still, listening to the slow drip of his own blood, the soft static of the radio, the faraway murmur of a world that had already moved on without him. 30 million records. And somehow, against every odd and every contract clause, he was finally alone. Truly. Horribly. Free.